Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. 2001 for the Noble Ape development, which also, I guess, turns into 2001 for Tom Barbalet. That's really what is being discussed here. By 2001, I'd reclaimed a lot of the development associated with Noble Ape. I was investing more time on it. It was still called the Nervana project. And I left the US in February to go to Leicester in the UK. My father was based in Leicester in the UK. He was about to get married. I stayed with him for a relatively brief period of time, and then I had to find my own accommodation and work. A local Ericsson in this area employed me almost immediately. I literally walked in one day, had the job the next. And I worked at Ericsson for a period of about 3 months, including 1 month back in the US, which was very curious because I'd basically been juggling visas while I was in the US previously. I wasn't able to earn money in the US, which made it particularly interesting, but I'd spent a year in the US. Well, yes, effectively a year in the US, give or take an additional period of time where I came back to try to work out whether the Wozniak visa situation was going to work out, but it hadn't. When I arrived in the UK, I was heavily emaciated. One of the things I didn't really talk about in the Short Funk recording previously was that basically as my money was eroding, I was stopping eating, I was reducing basically every aspect of my life. I'd also collapsed on the streets around the time that the funding had cut from my sponsor. I was just basically going through extreme exhaustion, primarily because I was working with a few startups. I talked about Pocket Bytes specifically, but there were other startups and other ventures that were taking my time, and I was spending an increasingly large amount of time either working for or in front of lawyers. It was just a really bad scene. By the time I arrived in the UK, I just needed to calm things down and return to the Noble Ape development that I had enjoyed prior to going to the US. This was done in the strange circumstance because I lived at the Leicester YMCA for my time in Leicester when I wasn't back in the US, and I worked at least an extra day and plenty of additional overtime at Ericsson because the Ericsson job, although it was a full-time job, was billed back to Ericsson in Sweden, and I was paid an hourly wage, which was very interesting because as a single man, or at least a man who had a girlfriend back in the US, I was able to work Saturdays and occasionally Saturdays and Sundays. I'd frequently go to Ericsson at, 6:30, 7 a.m., have a shower, they had showers on the facility, and start working, and finish work at about 7 p.m., time to call my girlfriend, go and have a meal, and then go back to the Leicester YMCA. The Leicester YMCA wasn't a particularly positive place. It was a place where people were being basically extradited from the country. There was a lot of physical violence. There was a lot of just general threats of violence, and it wasn't a particularly nice place. Through this period of time, the fleas in the Leicester YMCA began attacking my body. They ate through to the bone and big toe on one of my feet. My feet are still really heavily scarred from the experience at the Leicester YMCA. And I felt that I was really at the end of the earth, desperately trying to recreate something that had once existed. I spent a long period of time working on the Nervana project, as it was called then, and somewhat curiously over this period of time as well, a fellow who worked for Microsoft created a startup that he called Nervana, and he wanted to buy the Nervana.com domain name from me. It was Nervana.com. He became a hostile aggressor. Thankfully, through the Wozniak period, I'd learned how to deal with these kind of people. I just basically ignored him, put off a lot of his hostile correspondence with the view that I held the domain name and all his aggressive acts, all his copyright filings and various other things that he did to try and get the domain name from me wasn't going to work because I had evidence. I'd sent to the Copyright Office in the US the original Isle of the Ape CD. So it was all well defined that Nervana, as in the Nervana project, existed well before this fellow had tried his, intellectual property play or whatever he was trying to get this domain name from me. Over this period of time as well, while working for Ericsson, they sent me to Sweden. When I was at Stockholm in the evenings, I worked very heavily on the Nervana project, rewriting it very tightly to look similar to a lot of the open source that Apple was producing at the time. Apple's open source model was very layered, it was very structurally layered, and this lent itself very well to the potential structure and layering that I could put in the Nervana simulation to get it to look more like these Apple documented things. Through this period of time as well, it became evident that I needed to rewrite a component of the simulation to be what was called at the time Carbon, which was the vernacular for both runnable on OS 9 and OS 10, and I was very mindful that this work was coming up. After the Ericsson in the UK closed, I came back to the UK to get a job in Wilmslow, where I was for 3.5 years with my wife following, although we got married in 2002. And Wilmslow also provided an environment where I could really start developing the carbonization of the Noble Ape simulation for the Mac. And this work was very interesting for a number of reasons. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.